The content and opinions shared on Talking Randomish are intended for entertainment and informational purposes. They reflect the personal views of the host and guests and do not constitute professional advice or represent any affiliated organization.
We're talking randomly. Talking random. We're talking randomly. Talking random.
Welcome back to Barbershop Talking Randomish. I am your master barber, Enrique King.
Oh my God. I thought maybe tonight. No, you don't. I thought maybe tonight though we were gonna get past that.
It just come out. I don't know where it is coming. It just sometimes it just sneak out.
Hispanic. It's like Hispanic.
We'll start.
It's one of them things. We are going to continue this great conversation that we having. The ladies have taken over the building. You see, they put chair number one, the Master Scalper, who graced us coming from maternity leave. But they put him out. They put Slim Fit, the sensitive, out, and I think the only reason they hadn't kicked me out is because I'm the one running the boards. I think that's the only reason they hadn't put me out.
They just couldn't hang with us.
But somebody looking at me like she ready to put me out.
I mean, this is your show.
I like to call that my minister Shay.
I think we could probably run that board though, if we tried.
Because you're a woman and you can do that.
Simply because.
You can do it.
I want to thank the women that are in the building because they are having an excellent conversation. So I'm just gonna get on out the way because Kat got something she wants to say.
Well, normally you guys kick me out if I don't bring food. And I bring food and then the guys leave. So I don't know. I wanted to tell you guys about Small Cakes. They're an amazing new cupcake shop. They do ice cream too. They're over off of Malcolm Bridge Road in that new shopping center. If you've seen it, they've been building the shopping center for years. So now they're finally businesses coming in and you're noticing more activity.
Is that a red velvet right there?
There's red velvet in there. There's
Let me see that.
Double
Dutch chocolate.
So
Get phased out.
anyhow, check out smallcakesathens.com. They're off Malcolm Bridge Road, and Don Brinkley is the owner, and it's basically a family business. Every time you go in, you're meeting a new member of the family. At least that's how I feel. But they're amazing. Support a local cupcake shop.
Well, sounds like you need to come back with Dawn Brinkley.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, she's out of town, so
okay.
I'll harass her some more.
Okay.
You know how I do.
All right. Well, y'all do what you do. I'm out the way.
But they're amazing, so check them out.
Okay. You sure?
He's not.
Don't go to the game.
Is there a question you like to ask?
No, I'm watching the game. I don't know what you talking about. This fine Medola commercial going on right here. The mark of a fighter. That's what I'm watching right now.
All right.
So,
Dr. Lakeisha. So before the break, we were talking about, there are people who avoid situations or choose to not engage for either their mental health reasons or for avoidance because they don't have the capacity to deal with the situation at a time. And then we have people who constantly want to engage, like every little thing they want to talk about, they want to deal with, and it's either again to help their mental health or they're badgering, right? Everything's an issue. So what do you think about that?
I think I was thinking through what we had said earlier about how sometimes we find that in our society that women tend to talk more, right, about feelings or what's going on or whatever, which is good. And so I think talking is a good thing. Expression is a good thing. So even, I like to tell people, even when you don't have the words, what other way can you express yourself in like in a healthy way? We're working with children. They may not have the words. You know, I used to be guilty of this. I said my own children, why are you doing this? I don't know. You know, so, but there is, a person can talk a lot, but maybe sometimes they still haven't made the connection between their stress, their current problems, their maladaptive behaviors, and what might be inside of them that's helping create that. And so oftentimes when I, you know, if I've ran into a person professionally, like in a professional setting, that I'm like, oh gosh, it's a lot of content, you know, you might still be able to help, because sometimes it's not the words that are lacking, it's the insight that's lacking. And it's just like with a person who doesn't talk a lot, that person may actually have some level of insight, but they may not have the words yet. And so sometimes our work as therapists is like helping develop the insight, or if the insight is there, helping figure out, okay, now what do I do with this? How do I talk about this? And as a result, how do I behave so that I am decreasing my stress, this sort of stress load on my mental health. And so talking is great, you know, but it's not the only thing. And, you know, so we all have, you know, friends, maybe family members, people we know, talk a whole lot.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're like, okay, what did you just say? You know,
You don't want to have them really
what's
repeat
happening
it.
here? Yeah, you know, so that is where the work is. And not just if you're a therapist, but if you're a friend,
It's
if
true.
you're a family member, if you're a community member, you know, if you're a peer, you know, that really is where the work is, figuring out how do we make this connection for this person, and if we can't, how do we get them the resources? Again, it may not always be therapy, okay, but how do we get some resources to help them connect the insight, be it childhood trauma, it could be adult trauma, it could be a variety of different things. How do they make that connection from what has happened, what's deep down inside of me, to what's driving these feelings and these behaviors?
In our community, or just in society in general, what do you think is the role of relationship between faith and spirituality and mental health?
You know, that's
Good
my
shot.
favorite
Good
subject.
shot.
That's why I spoke on being an earth angel.
What does that relationship look like?
It gives you something to believe in bigger than yourself, because for me, I'm more universe, energy, but that's my spirituality. But knowing that if I do good on this earth, good's gonna come back to me, because that's the energy that I'm giving out. It keeps me sane sometimes, because things get so bad in the world that what else is there? If we don't have faith, if we don't have some kind of spirituality, we would just give up.
But is there a line where spirituality or your faith can impede your
for sure.
search or your need to have a health, to support your mental health, right? Is it always a good thing?
No. Yeah, I was gonna say.
Okay. Miss B
she
said
said
no.
no.
Well, Miss B said no.
I said yes, so I'm gonna let her go
Okay.
first.
Okay.
You want me to do the positive first?
Floor is yours.
So, for me, my spirituality as an earth angel, I understand that each thing that I deal with is a test. So I understand that it is something that I could possibly feel emotionally, and it could happen physically, because the body feels it. Like these emotions, it's not just a thought. It makes the body react. And to me, that's the spirituality of understanding that you're here to experience life. So I kind of look at it as being like a God guru when you've experienced more emotions than others, because that makes you more compassionate, and it makes you more empathic to people that are going through certain things, because you can actually understand where they're coming from. I'm clairsentient. So
I'm sorry?
clairsentient.
And what is that?
So I can feel the emotions of people around me. I can feel energy. And
How is that different from an empath?
well, empaths, they care for people. But to be clairsentient, you don't have to tell me that someone just passed away. You don't have to tell me that you lost your job. Because I can put my feet in your shoes and instantly have what you need. So being clairsentient is more like being Jesus' niece, in a sense. So it's a big job. You are to follow and abide by that, because you're not here to cast anyone out. That's already been done. So you're here to help them validate those emotions and come back to some type of grounding, because you got to keep going. So
She's mad. I'm sorry. Jesus' niece and an earth angel.
amen.
What did you say that wrong?
Amen.
Okay.
She's making notes over here.
Well, I'm
Yes.
tracking. I'm tracking. So you say yes, it's a positive thing as far as a relationship between spirituality and mental health. But Ms. B said no, it ain't always positive.
No, it's not always positive, because spirituality is definitely a part of it, right? Because you have to be in tune with yourself first, right? Aside from self, there is nothing greater, other than the Creator Himself, right? However, what good am I to anybody if I'm not good to myself first? So if I'm so focused on God, the angels, spirituality, and doing what the good book says to do, how much focus am I taking off myself? Because now I'm in this lane, I've gotten out of this lane, but what about me? Because if I'm not healthy, if I'm the head of my situation, the head, right? And my head is not healthy, me, how much more can I expect for the body to act in alignment and or accordingly? So I think sometimes it is, and this is just my opinion, I just think sometimes it is, spirituality is overexpressive. It's not always a good thing, because it takes the focus off what really needs to be the center, which is yourself, when it comes to mental health. We believe God for all things, and whose report are you going to believe? Just some of the things that's in the Bible. And I don't dispute, I'm not debating any of that, right? But what happens if there is a true chemical imbalance? Have we looked at that?
But is there room for both?
There is room for
Yes.
both. Because there is room for both. But it's not always a positive thing, though, is what I'm saying. Because if you over-exercise it, then you kind of lose focus of self. If I have this chemical imbalance and I'm just so steadfast on God's word is this, and He said this, and He said that, when in actuality, I really do need Adderall, because there is a true chemical imbalance, right? To help me balance and get me right. Am I doing myself justice? Over exercising my spirituality? Or an injustice, not really taking the reality? This is idealism over here, spirituality, but my situation over here is realism. So which one do I deal into? I think spirituality, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's not. It is definitely a positive thing, right? But I think sometimes we do over-exercise it, and we lose focus on what really needs to happen. Realism, idealism. How do we balance
So
the two?
trusting in God versus, and keeping yourself from taking the medication that you might need, and just trusting that God will take care of what you need. Is that?
Well, I say I split spirituality from God, and I call God religion. See, we didn't say religion. Spirituality to me is about me. That's why my whole aligning myself, that's the whole doing shadow work. It's all about me. Spirituality is about me being the best higher self that I can become. That's why I speak on being an earth angel. That's why I speak on being divine feminine. All those things have to do with me. And I'm leading by example, leading by being a model, for other people to have some type of following the yellow brick road in my eyes, because they need some type of prototype. Some of us are the prototypes. We are to lay the foundation for other people to follow. So spirituality is all about you. Now I say religion, sometimes it's just control because we're waiting on God to change things. Spirituality says you go. Spirituality says you do what you need to do for you.
Well, we earlier, a couple of weeks ago, we had a discussion about the role of religion in our community. And I think we did come to the consensus, and Brother Rick, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I see you over there. I see the leg shaking and the hand moving over there. But that it's about a relationship with Christ. It's about a relationship with God, because he didn't come to make us religious. He came to make us righteous. So it's about their relationships. When you talk about religion and it being controlling, that is outside of that relationship. I think that there are people who, because you were talking about, Ms. B, you said, I think you said it was overexpressed. Was that the word? It was over. Was that your word?
Overly expressive, and sometimes we over energize it.
Yes, overly expressive and overly energized. But for me, it may appear to be I may be overexpressing, but then, Dr. Lakeisha said, well, she ain't doing enough. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's an individual thing. I think there is room for both a relationship with the Lord and properly taking care of your mental health. I do think that some people, but I do believe I serve God work miracles. I believe that.
Oh, absolutely.
But then I also know that, he had disciples that were medical doctors, right? So I know that as well. So I do think there's room for both in our community, definitely for us as women. I think, the assumption that women tend to be more spiritual, so I think there is room for both. But I do think that we talked about the reality of our situation, right? Even in order for the Lord to help us with our mental health, we have to be real about the reality of the situation.
We do.
You have to be real about that. Dr. Keisha.
I tend to think that any coping mechanism, any experience, even if it's meant to be like fully positive, there's always the potential for it to be unhealthy, because, and that is my own personal belief, because we're a broken world, we're broken people. When we're born into a world where people are unhealed, and they project those things in a variety of different ways, through religion, through media, through what we consume, through quite literally what we the things that we put in our bodies, all of these different things. And so I do think that for me, I can speak for myself, that I think spirituality has been a necessary coping, not beyond coping, actually. It's been a necessary compass, a necessary core for me to develop, and then to do something in the community that I'm in. Because I think that with spirituality or religion, particularly spirituality, it is about us. It's about me. It's about my development, my growth, and from my own personal, walk in spirituality, as a Christian. It's about my relationship with God, and it's not just that, though. It's about, what do I do in the world around me? So it's this delicate balance that I believe that we have to walk, sort of a battle that we have to fight, and even more so as women, because we tend to lean on one side or the other. We're either giving all of ourselves and then just merely religious, we're trying to do the things, but we're empty. Or we're told from, perhaps a more secular, and I would even argue, I don't want to get too controversial here, but from especially some of the earlier feminists that are more documented in like your traditional literature, typically not people of color, but
that first wave,
that didn't quite have Black women in mind, but we're then told, oh, it's me, And I don't believe that that's who I was put here. I don't believe that's what I was put here for my own edification and my own, like, to live up to my own, like, whatever, highest energy, fullest potential without actually impacting the world around me.
Right.
So I don't know, you know, it's this thing, anything can be a bad thing. We talked about mental health, you know, people, you're sort of this fad, you know, mental health, how people like toss out trauma, everything. I mean, it can all sort of take this form, but I think our role is, you know, to delicately walk that balance, not perfecly.
Yeah.
But when we notice that we're in these spiritual places, and we feel that it's gone too far, I believe, you know, not all the time, but sometimes it's my job to say, hey, you know, when you told this person to just pray about it and leave their therapist or just tell God about it, I don't know that that's been working for the past 5 years. So can we have a conversation about this? I do think that perhaps they do need to tell God about it. And, you know, according to what we know, God already knows. There's something else. And so it's our role to sort of challenge those institutions and those places that actually make people's experiences worse and actually make their spiritual walk weaker, whatever their beliefs are. But that's hard because it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and it requires us to whole sort of walk hand in hand in these like spiritual environments and working with the leaders and you know, and so it's tough work.
I think that leads us back to the conversation about when we talk about mental health, like what is needed for us as women and for us as a society to really understand what mental health is. Because you're talking about working with leaders, you know, you're talking about being parents, you have children dealing with issues, we're talking about our girlfriends and those who are following with us and after us, to have a good base knowledge, because we're not all therapists, we're not all counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists. So is there something that we can come into agreement about? You know, an understanding that we can come into an agreement about, well, we can, as a community, support each other, and therefore, you know, in turn supporting ourselves.
So kind of to tie what everybody was just talking about into your question, I believe we all have a purpose. We're all here for some purpose. And sometimes people are born knowing their purpose, and sometimes it takes us 40 years to figure it out. But once you know that purpose, everything else in life serves that purpose. So when you're interacting with people, it is a test. You are tested, and it's how you take that situation and how you move with it, what you learn from it, and how you deal with it and give back to the community because of what you've learned, that will elevate you and your purpose. That also means you're going through these mental health moments where you're really internalizing things that you might not, you're struggling with what you believe and then the reality that you're living with. So that's another moment that you're being just truly tested on where you are and knowing how to handle it.
So what is the truth? What is the truth that we can take from mental health? What is the truth? We talked about some of the myths, but what is the truth?
Transparency.
Transparency.
I think a lot of us are not transparent about a lot of things. Since I've only been on my healing journey for 3.5 years, and it's work.
Well, I am very proud of you that you even started the journey and that you followed
Miss
through.
B.
I didn't have a choice.
Miss B.
Yes, sir.
No.
Miss B.
Yes, sir.
You care to talk about?
I just said transparency.
Okay.
I'm good.
I mean,
No.
Do stories.
Yeah.
Because and the reason why I asked that is, I know you and you know me, and we have helped each other.
Yes.
Because we went through a similar thing.
Yes.
So do you care to talk about it?
I don't mind.
Let's get it.
I think she probably was going to talk about it if we had not been again by the only man in the room.
I'm watching the game. Well, good shot.
So So, 3.5 years ago, I attempted suicide twice. And no one can tell me that what I did, I shouldn't have been out of here, right? And I did it twice. I'm just like, wait a minute, hold up. Okay, God, what's the deal, right? And then when I was going to do it for the third time, my youngest son, Nehemiah, he came into the room. Like, he just came into my room one day, and one night, and he was like, I just want to hug you. I was like, what are you in here for? He was like, I just want to hug you. So I'm like, oh, okay, what you want? He just hugged me, and he just said in my ear, I want you to live. And it was that moment, I'm just like, okay, there's no way he knew what I was in here doing, right? And that is when I was like, okay. The very next day, I went and I told them what I did. And they were like, okay, well, because you did what you did, we have to do this. And I was like, but I have a son. And they said, well, we can partially institutionalize you. You would have to be here during the day, but we will allow you to go home because you have a son and his father passed away. So it's just he and I, right? And so I was like, okay, I can do that. So I'm getting up and I'm going to the institution every single day. And this is where I began to make that connection with some of the things that I was doing to what happened to me beginning 9 years old. And because I suppressed it, that engagement did not engage all of these years, right? Even some things that had taken place in my life in adulthood, I gotta keep it moving because I have children. I don't have time to stop. I gotta keep it moving. I have to provide for them. Never dealt with it. No engagement. I'm suppressing it. And it just continued to, I've suppressed it. And it finally came to a head. There was one incident that took place at work, and I said, I cannot let this happen. I am better off dead than I am alive. If I'm dead, I know my sons will be taken care of, right? That was my whole thought, and it was just taking a toll on me. One of the other contributing factors is when the things that took place when I was a little girl, my dad did some terrible things to us. I kept it moving. And Rick has always referred to me as a dude. But because of what happened to me, I adopted the mentality, this controlled me, but I'm going to use it to control everything else as an adult. That was my mindset, not dealing with what happened to me. So I think the common roles were reversed, right? Where I would kind of think like a dude when it came to relationships, you know? So a lot of those things, then my father passed away, I was like, oh, I can breathe, you know, fresh air, I can go on about my business. But that wasn't the case because I never dealt with what happened. And that coupled with something that took place in my job, everything came to a head and I really didn't know how the end was going to be. And the only reason I didn't go to counseling throughout the years, because every time I would try to go, the counselor would say, I know how you feel. So then I asked the counselor, has this ever happened to you? They say no. Has this ever happened to you? They say no. Then it's impossible for you to know how I feel. Now I feel that you lied to me. And because you lied to me in my head, I don't trust you. There is no relationship without trust. So I never got that, right? And then when all of this took place, I'm going to counseling, I'm putting in the work, didn't really want to deal with a lot of stuff because I didn't want to revisit. I felt like, I'm good with that, let me go. But Miss Cortez, her precious heart has dealt with me. In 3.5 years, I'm still unpacking that bag, right? I now know the difference in protecting my feelings and protecting my peace. Protecting my feelings is building a wall. Building a wall is not healthy. I set boundaries. I learned how to set boundaries, right? Still being able to identify those triggers and then being able to associate the feeling with what happened. It kind of reconnects me there. So this healing journey, I kind of look at things differently. And I know you talked about you will back off and you cut off people. Let me tell you, my cutoff game is so strong now. sometimes I don't even talk to myself. Okay.
That's
Um,
that's
um,
what I mean by disassociating. It's just
But see, now in a healthier place, I no longer build walls and keep people out, because the same people I'm keeping out, I'm preventing the very thing that I may need
Yeah.
to come in.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing is I set those boundaries, right?
I think that's such a good point.
She spoke a word right there.
Protecting our feelings is different than protecting our peace.
Yes.
That is such a powerful point, because we're constantly talking about I feel, or my feelings were hurt. And then we're talking about protecting our peace, but really, like you said, we are building those walls.
Yes.
So what does it mean to protect your peace? I think it does mean, as you said, transparency and communication.
Mhm.
This is where I am, this is what I need, this is what I don't need.
Right.
You know, and holding those boundaries true,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I think as far as, you know, we are in the middle of this whole cutoff culture. I can't
oh my goodness.
I can't stand it.
Yeah, cancel culture.
Cancel.
Yeah, this,
Yes.
but it's also this cutoff culture. Like, well, I'm just done with you. I mean, I mentor a lot of young adults, and they're like, I'm closer to people, my friends, than I am with my family. Not cutting my family off. Well, this is your TikTok friend that you've known for 6 months. So I'm confused. So I'm just trying to figure out, what's going on with them. But I think there is, the whole cutting people off. Sometimes you do need to cut people off, but it is that engagement.
It's
right?
that engagement.
You got to have that engagement on some level.
Yeah.
As far as what's the issue that has triggered? That's another word, right? This person has brought up. Sometimes it's the person, but sometimes it's what's going on inside.
Right.
And so whether we're engaging with our own emotions and feelings and trying to expand or explore our peace, or we're engaging with the other person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I wonder how many people really are able to connect what they're feeling to what has happened. And a lot of times there's a great disconnect, right?
Yeah.
With me, I considered myself an overachiever, a perfectionist, having to prove myself to people. It wasn't until I was on my healing journey that I found out me being an overachiever has everything to do with me being devalued, because I was put into foster care and didn't think that I had any value. So now I've spent all my life trying to prove to people that I am worthy enough, when all I have to do is prove it to myself. I'm the only one that matters, right? There are people, even in my family, right? I no longer cut them off. I still love you, will still reach out to you, am cordial to you, will respect you. But what you're doing is not conducive to who I am or where I'm going.
Right.
So I got to leave you where you are. I empathize with you. I have more empathy now. I'm not an empath. I'm not. But I do have a bit more empathy, and that's what we're still working on with my therapist now, is because let's say with my mom, my biological mom, I never could understand what, if you knew this was happening to my siblings, why would you allow me to go over there? As a parent, and I protect my boys at all costs, right? As a parent, I can't fathom putting my child in harm's way. So there were some things that with Miss Cortez, she was like, and then she would ask me questions. Well, do you know what your mom had to go through?
Yeah.
And that's why I say the environments that we have to create, the environment of the results that we want, right? Because if this happened to my mom, she's only doing what she saw, and she may not have known any different, right? And then my grandmother may have done what her mother did, so it could go back generations. And so I'm learning empathy. I am more empathetic, with people. So even with my family members that I don't have a close-knit relationship with, it's not that I hate you. I haven't cut you off. It's just that what you're doing right now is not conducive to who I am or where I'm going.
And I think
so I got to leave you right here, because I got to keep moving.
That's right, and that's important. Right, that's important to be able to to understand it and articulate that, because rejection, I think that rejection has a huge emphasis on our mental health, what we perceive as rejection, especially as women, you know. And so it's important that we're able to communicate where we are, so we're not rejecting other people. It goes to building the walls and, you know, protecting the feelings and not the peace. But when we talk about mental health, and we're talking about relationships, right? We're talking about parental relationships. We're talking about, you know, relationships with others. How do we respond when we realize that we the problem? Right?
I'm not the problem. What you talking about?
And that's the problem right there, right? So
I'm kidding.
I know you are. I know you are. But sometimes we're the problem, right? And what is our response to that? Because it's very people can feel that they're being attacked or they're being misjudged, but sometimes we are the problem, right? Sometimes we are, and we have a responsibility. That responsibility, as far as our response to mental health, becomes double fold. What's going on with us and who we are, emotionally or mentally or physically, where we're the problem, and what damage, what harm are we causing other people when we're the problem?
3 words.
Because I don't think we ever really think about that. Like sometimes I'm wrong.
Yep, 3 words. 3 words. And Dr. Keisha, tell me if I'm wrong. Responsibility, accountability, and ownership. That's it. I have a responsibility to be the best person that I can be to you. I need you to hold me accountable, and I need to take ownership for what's mine, whether it's good, bad, ugly, or indifferent. And a lot of times my middle son and I, we bump heads all the time, right? And I tell him, what is it? Mom, you this, okay, tell me. I don't know what to fix if I don't know that it's broken. Right? So I need you to tell me. And he's like, Mom, I gotta go. I'm going. No. You're gonna sit right here. Mom, I gotta go to work. Okay, then you need to start talking. But we don't leave. And I do that. He's like, you're trying to control me. No. Because we're not gonna be here tomorrow. We're gonna be a step further, right? So what I want is transparency and effective communication, right? So I have to create that environment. And that's what I do with my sons. But with them, I have a responsibility to them. I need them to hold me accountable. And once they hold me accountable, I have to take ownership.
I think that's true, but that's another level.
It is
of understanding of self.
Can I add a 4th word to that? Prozac. For me, it's Prozac. On top of Prozac gave me the ability to think logically, think through things the way that you're talking about.
And that's that chemical imbalance where the Prozac is needed. You know, I talked about Adderall, right? But that was just an example. So this is a situation where Prozac is needed because there is a true chemical imbalance that has nothing to do with her, but it's a component that she needs to maintain, right?
It was also when I asked my daughter's father to move out, in order for us to be able to have a good conversation and not just yelling at each other, I had to take medication, go see a psychiatrist to get on medication so that I could logically think through how to respond to him without hurting my daughter, because she's number 1. So no matter what, he's in my life forever, period. And right now he's living with us because he's having some problems with his house. So that's how good Prozac is. It's so good for me that it gives me the ability to logically think through a situation, figure out what it's doing to me, how it's making me feel, and take ownership of my part in it. Doesn't mean that I might not get emotional or upset about it, but it's still being able to have the other 3 words that you talked about. Because without it, I wouldn't have.
So that clarity is needed, right? That self-reflection is needed. That transparency and that honesty. You know, one of the things that someone said this years ago and it stayed with me. Like, there's no deception like self-deception. You know, there's not. And I think when we live, because I think especially women of color, and it may be true for all women, but I'm not a white woman, honey, so I can't speak for y'all. But I'm sure. But you know, that duality, right? The code switching. For me, those things are very unhealthy. Very, very unhealthy. I had a woman of color tell me a few months ago, 3 times, try not so much being yourself. And I thought, well, who else am I supposed to be? And then she said, well, I'm sure you're a different person with your friends. You're a different person at home. You're a different person. I said, no, I am the same person wherever I go. Because for me, that's going to cause me too much stress to hold multiple roles. I carry and I live in multiple roles, but if I can't be me, then I'm not going to be able to do that, because that is what's going to trigger depression, that triggers anxiety, that triggers all those things for me. And so, you know, culturally, we've been taught that we do have to hold this duality. And sometimes I think, you know, years ago with our ancestors and those who've gone before us, it was for their safety. And sometimes now it's still for our safety, you know. But we do have some level of liberty to just be. But I think for women, that may be the hardest thing, to learn to just be. Just be. And because there's so many expectations. And some of them are realistic, but most of them are unrealistic. And a lot of them we place on ourselves. And so to learn to just be who we are, you know, and I think that helps us along our journey in as a whole, not just our mental health journey, but our journey as parents and, you know, and as wives and as friends and as sisters. So I do, you know, because when I think about, you know, sometimes, you know, I'm the problem. You know, I always try to check myself first. When there's a situation, is it me? You know, is it me? Am I the problem? Or is this really happening? Like, is this really something? Or is this something I need to really address? But usually I need to address it within myself first. And then if I feel the need to go ahead and address it, I do. But I always try to check myself first, because, you know, sometimes I be tripping, you know?
But sometimes you're being told that you're too much as a woman.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
And that's where...
Oh, no, you're hitting on something.
And
yeah.
I know you said angry black woman earlier, but just as a woman in general, we're expected to show up differently. We're supposed to be quieter. We're supposed to let the men control the situation.
Who said that?
I'm saying society has kind of taught us that. This is not how I feel now by any means, but growing up, keep in mind I'm older than you.
You sure?
Oh yeah. You said you're in your 30s?
Absolutely not.
What'd you say?
How old are you?
I'm 44.
I'm 52.
Okay, never mind. I like to make stuff up too, so we'll just go with that.
Unless you're using it.
So, from my perspective, I was taught to be quiet. You know, as a child, be quiet, sit still, do this, do that. Even in school, that's what we're taught, right? And now they have these bouncy balls and all this stuff to help kids work out and deal with things the way that they need to. But when we were growing up, you sit still, you stay quiet, somebody else is speaking. When I have interactions with men, sometimes they will tell me I'm being too much. Now, Rick will tell me to shut it because I talk too much. So he's taking my
I'm sorry, you
place
said Rick said you talk too much?
Oh yeah, no. I'm behaving tonight. I'm behaving tonight. But
Get to going.
there are yeah, I get to going, and he's right. I can be a lot when it comes to talking, but I'm also learning a lot from people as we're interacting. And I learned more about Rick within the first 5 minutes that we met that I wouldn't have learned in different circumstances if I didn't just talk to people. But we're taught to take on different responsibilities, even as mothers and caregivers and wives or spouses, there's more of an expectation of us, and we don't have the same respect, maybe that's not the right word, but when we get too loud or get too much or whatever, we're being too emotional. We're overreacting. You want to see overreacting, you keep talking, because then you'll really see it. But that's what we're told, right?
Yeah.
So how do we push back and own ourselves and be who we are without questioning ourselves at the same time? Because for a moment, you are checking yourself. There is that little voice in your head that doubts something. Well, why the heck are we even doubting ourselves?
Well, I'm not saying I'm doubting myself and I'm checking myself. I'm taking the time to reflect. Like that's what I'm doing.
Right.
Like, what's my part in this
Exactly.
situation?
What's my role in
Yeah.
this situation? Is this something I need to respond to? That's something I've learned to do because I have to take that beat.
Right.
Yeah.
You do have to take that moment. But there is a thing, being told you're too much. You're too much.
And I think that sometimes for me, sometimes I am too much, and I need someone to tell me. Sometimes it's my kids. I mean, it's how you say it,
Right.
Right.
Respectfully.
I gotta, but I have, like, from a parental perspective, I tend to think many, if not most parents, even if they don't take responsibility, I think many parents experience guilt because
Yeah.
we never know if we're doing this right. And in fact, we don't have confirmation. I mean, we have confirmation sometimes, and then like your child will do something, you're like, no, why did you? It's about me. Like, why did you go down to these people, whatever, and do, like, didn't I teach you? So it's like this up and down road. It's this journey that you learn and you do right things and then you do wrong things and then your kids are developing and we're still developing. Just because we're in our 40s and 50s, it's development across the lifespan. And after we work through this particular thing, guess what? It's time to work through something else because we don't live in isolation. And sometimes we don't even know the things that are unresolved until we hit a new season or until we meet new people. And so, yeah, I do think, sort of related to your, one of your questions is like, how do, what is this about, like with parents and in the roles we in, how do we take responsibility in the words that you mentioned? We have to surround ourselves by people who say, yeah, that was a bit much. And sometimes, depending on how I am in a particular area, I can almost go back and reflect after the moment and say, oh, girl, you did all. And sometimes, if I've done enough work in the area, I can tell when I'm getting ready to go down a path. And sometimes I feel like I can't, and when I feel like I can't control it, and I feel like, one sign I've had, like, especially in my late 40s, is that I wouldn't have really put together in my 30s. And I don't know if this is related to, like, what we were talking about earlier, hormones, perimenopause, but I know if I go through a week or even a day where I have, like, pretty much fallen out with just about everybody, be it externally or in my head, that is my sign. That is my sign that you're getting ready to do too much.
Yeah.
And something about you need to go, you need to back away. You need to decompress. You need to go do whatever it is you need to do because there's no way in the world that you engage with 20 people today and you fell out.
Right, everybody.
19 of
That's
them.
right. Everybody can't be
Keisha, you're doing good because you can deal with 20 and fall out with 19. I deal with 10 and I fall out with 15.
Listen. Sometimes I am the person I fall out with. It gets that bad.
My therapist introduced me to mindfulness. How do you go about developing mindfulness so that you can tap into that? Hey, boy, you finna.
We're gonna let little sister here answer the
I've
question.
been waiting.
Yes,
Yes,
she has.
it's called emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Once we know those things, all of it makes sense. It just, you don't know when it's gonna come. I just give a big shout out to Valerie Norwood, which is family violence intervention person. And she teaches all of the things that y'all were speaking of, like, am I tripping? Or is this person being a narcissist? Is this person manipulating my thoughts? Have I isolated myself to the point where I don't even know, if I am in the right or wrong? And these are things that we may not have much knowledge of. And in being in high conflict situations, and I think all of those things impact us so heavily that emotional intelligence will always give you those cues. You'll be like, you know what, I'm burning up. This person making me upset.
Yeah.
And you'll automatically know what's up. And I think that is one of the biggest things that could really propel us through it all if we just had emotional intelligence.
Listening to you say that, it makes me think like one of the hardest things for most, not all, but many people to answer is what's going on emotionally right now. How are you feeling? People tend to give you what they're thinking. They'll give you more content. Like, she said this and then I said that. What are you feeling right now? Like, how are you going to connect what it is you're feeling? Because we just sort of bypass it. Speaking of it, emotional, we bypass it, and we miss that opportunity to then build that emotional intelligence and just becoming aware of what's going on inside of us. Like, was this really about, my husband or my children not doing their chores, or am I feeling undervalued?
Well, let me ask you this then. Does a lot of that come from the fact that a lot of times we're not asked that particular question?
Yeah.
Because I do a thing sometime on Facebook where I ask, how are you doing? No, for real, how are you doing?
But see, how are you doing and what are you feeling are two completely
But
different.
I get what you're, I get what you're saying, but sometimes we're not asked in that particular way. And I ask that question, those questions in those particular manner, because if I ask you how you doing, you're gonna give me I'm all right. But I said, no, how are you doing? That means you have to sit down and do an evaluation real quick before you answer that question. So my question is, are we sometimes asked, or do we put ourselves in situations where we have to?
Well, see, that goes back to what Ms. B was saying about responsibility.
Yeah.
You may not always be asked that question by someone else, but you can ask yourself.
Yeah.
But and I guess my thing is, do you know how to ask yourself that question? Sometimes. If we're not emotionally intelligent, how do we go about asking ourselves that question?
If you lack emotional intelligence, you're not gonna know.
Exactly.
You're not gonna know. You have to be in tune with your emotions.
That's right.
And
your body. You have to be in tune.
And there are certain things about your body that will tell you how you're feeling. But if you lack emotional intelligence, you're not going to be aware. And there are a lot of emotionally ignorant people.
Yes. Oh, yes. Absolutely.
And why am I whispering? I don't need to. There are a lot of emotionally ignorant people.
Yes, absolutely.
And when we ask people how you're doing, it has become such a part of our normal day-to-day language that we just say, I'm fine. Like, we're not even used to people pausing and saying, how are you? And looking us in the eye, because we just pass. We're like, hey, how are you? I'm good. Versus if we pause and say, and make eye contact and say, hey, I want to know, how are you doing? And pause. Even that feels different. But in our society, it's go, go, go. And how are you is a greeting. It's not a question.
That's right.
It's a greeting. It's just like saying, hey.
Yes.
And so we don't, have those.
But it's like anything else. It's something that can be learned.
That's true.
Or taught from
I
us.
think
Or
that
taught
question
too.
is us just because it comes automatic sometimes. I think it is a learned behavior. I no longer ask, how are you, if I don't mean it. I will ask, how's it going? Because in all honesty, half the times I would ask, how you doing? I don't give a damn. I don't care.
And that too.
But
And
yeah,
that too.
but as far as like,
Reading, yeah.
when we talk about emotional intelligence, though, it can be learned. And I think maybe it's learned in part. I think people don't necessarily, like, I'm going to take this course or this quiz on, or this, this get this resource on emotional intelligence. It's something that's built, right?
Yes.
It is. It's something that's cultivated within a person. And it takes time to do that. Because as Dr. Lakeisha said, we're ever growing and ever changing, ever transitioning. And I think that's something, I think also once we learn to embrace that change and transition in these new seasons is a lifelong activity, I think that will help our mental health, right? Because we try to go from one, if I can just make it to the end of this situation, if I can just cross this trauma, if I can just deal with this, but then we're setting ourselves up for failure and disappointment, right? There's an ebb and flow in life. And so we have to know how to ride that wave when it's high, and we have to know, okay, I'm coming down. And this is what happens for me when I'm coming down, right? These are the tools I need in order to do that. And then this is what I'm going to need to get back up. I think that's important. But again, when we talk about women, we often don't have the time. We talk about menopause. I talked to one of my friends. I called her, I had had 3 surgeries over the course of 4 months, and the last surgery resulted in a partial hysterectomy. And so, but I still wasn't in menopause because I was still releasing eggs, which was like, how you got a hysterectomy? But I still had my ovaries. I just didn't have a uterus. Ovaries are still producing eggs. So all of these things are going on, and I wasn't doing any hormone replacement therapy. But I remember I asked the mom of one of my friends, I said, how did you know you were in menopause? What was going on? And she was like, I don't know. She said, I was always upset about something. I was always stressed. I always had something going on. So, and a lot of women in that generation that were close to me, I asked them the same question, and they gave me the same answer because they didn't have the time, or they didn't take the time, or they didn't have the knowledge to know I can take this time to figure out what was going on with them physically. And so they suffered through not only these physical and hormonal changes, but also suffered through how it was affecting their mental health, right? And so when we talk about emotional intelligence, and we talk about having a healthy point of view stance, framework as far as our mental health, we're going to have to take the time. You said something earlier about therapy being work. Therapy is definitely work, but life is work. Everything's a process. And so it's a matter of, are we willing to put the work in? Do we have the resources and tools to put the work in? Do we know where to find them? And is there someone that's come alongside of us? Even if that's someone is ourselves, we have to hold our own hand to get through it. But life is an ebb and flow, because you hear people say, well, just hold on, you're going to get through this. You're going to get through this. Yeah, but you know what? It's going to be something else. And I'm not, this is not a doomsday speech, but that's just life.
But am I going to get through this alive? And that is a true question. Speaking to menopause, how many of us have heavy periods? We going to get real.
Not anymore, dear. I don't have
Yeah. But I mean, as women, when we talk about our periods, we all say at some point it's heavy, right? But my heavy could be different from your heavy. And I'm getting to a point here. I was a bank manager, I was a single mom, and I kept joking, I'm gonna have a heart attack. I'm gonna drop dead in this bank one day because I wasn't feeling right and I didn't know what it was. I had 3 days. I pushed myself for 3 days until I could not get out of the bed and I felt my organs shutting down. I went to the emergency room. This was during COVID, spent all day in the emergency room. My hemoglobin had gotten down to 6.8, which is when they start giving you a blood transfusion. All because I'm a woman and I'm dealing with normal female monthly things. So as women, we need to talk more about menopause. We need to talk more about what we go through with our bodies, with our periods, and share these things, because realistically, what I went through, women of color are more likely to have problems because of fibroids. So are we having, because I know my mama said, oh, I know how you feel. No, you don't, because you've never been in the emergency room thinking that you're not going to make it out. Her situation was different than mine, just like all of us. Our bodies are going to react differently, but we need to be more in tune and take the time, because that impacts our mental health. If we're not healthy and able to move and function, then that's having a negative impact on our mental health as well.
It is. And I think too, like, some of our responsibility is to be, this is a delicate balance, but to be there for others, right? It's such a delicate balance, because when we are working on our healing and we have all these other things going on, we are used to, in our society, me, right? And we have these walls up. And I'm not talking about like boundaries. I'm actually talking about walls, that's a little bit different. And so when we need help, we need someone to say, Keisha, you need to take a break. We don't really have it because we've had these walls up, and and we're really good. Many of us are really good at like keeping a distance and like reemerge. We sort of go away and come back when we're ready. So part of our job, I believe, as women, and not just women, as a community of people, is to know how to be there in better ways for people, so that when you say, I'm doing okay, I can say, I hear you, but I've noticed that, I don't know, it's, you're not laughing, or I can't put my finger on it, you don't seem like yourself. We have to figure out how to show up for people and almost insist. But our society has gotten to a place where it's just like, how dare you ask me? Like, am I, but that's our challenge as a community, to say, yeah, I know you said that you're doing okay. I don't know, something is telling me you're not. I can't put my finger on it. Something in your eyes, there's something there. Because we can't be healthy. I don't believe we can be healthy. We can be at our optimal mental health without a community.
I agree.
Yeah.
And we need to work more on it.
I want to ask a question, but I know we in time
You're not allowed.
because as a man, how can we help with the women that we love?
Listen,
How can
I got you.
not
being
yes
scared
I can listen, but sometimes it seems like
There's a
I
difference.
need to do something else.
There's a
Sometimes
difference.
That's the man in you.
Well,
There's a
well,
difference.
Rick,
I
between
think
your
some
and
people
yours.
have this situation where they feel like they're supposed to always be doing something. You
Well,
may
I know,
not
but
even know that she's content. And
But see-
you just feeling that overly urge. But I say also understand, like, even if you were 90, you would still say you're God's child. So you're learning with her the whole time.
It's a matter of
Sometimes you
asking
just
her.
ask.
It's communication.
but sometimes
It goes back to how are you doing? What do you
kind of
need?
disagree with that. So I shouldn't always have to tell you how to help me. You being my partner, you should know me well enough where you should be able to anticipate my needs.
And that's how we
You
think.
should be able to be proactive, operate in a proactive capacity and not a reactionary capacity. Because I may not always tell you, look, I just need space. You know my mood, you know me, you know what, let me let her breathe. Anticipate my need.
But I think it's a both thing.
On a normal, yes. But we talking now.
What's
And I'm
abnormal?
speaking. Now I'm speaking from
What's
the
abnormal?
no. I'm speaking from the middle part, that phase of the game. That's a little different.
It is different, but
That's-
what's
No, it's
normal and what's abnormal.
But it's a both and. It's a both and, right? She's right that if you have a relationship with someone, you should be in tune with that person enough to know. But then it's also a time where, because we are ever changing and ever growing, that we do need that question asked, because sometimes we may not know depending on what season we're in. So I think it's a both and. So it goes back to communication. Communication is not just verbal.
Yeah.
Right?
Communication is not verbal. You're
He
correct.
can't read our mind.
But
I
you
agree.
also have to, just as I always say that we create the environment that we want. If you want me to tell you, create that environment. You know what? Don't say anything. Let me come in. Hey, how's it going? That's gonna help me to open up about anything that I may be apprehensive about right now.
But I think it depends from woman to woman.
Yes. I know there's no blanket answer.
There's
to
no
the
blanket
bill.
answer.
No, there's
but
no. You
have
have
to know.
to.
It differs woman to woman,
Yes.
but you have to also know your woman.
And I agree. And I agree with you 1,000,000% there. But as a man, my body's not doing this. And if you don't know what your body's doing, that's what I'm asking. If you don't know what's going on with you, how can I help? Or it's just me being there.
But you know something. You know something is
Yes,
wrong.
yes,
you know
yes.
something
I
is off.
absolutely know something is wrong.
Educate yourself, Rick. So you know that this is something my wife is going to be going through. Then you proactive capacity.
You have a
Take it
responsibility.
take it upon yourself
Mhm.
to go and educate yourself. I need to know what menopause is, so I'll know what to expect. So when I see certain things, I'll know how to act. Not adjust what I'm doing, but I can act accordingly. You want to always stay in that proactive capacity, and not always in a reaction.
But then on the other side of that, because you know I'm always looking at the other side of the coin. Don't become an expert on what's going on with me. Trying to tell me.
Right.
So that's a good way to get
Because
hurt.
Fred Sanford read the book, and he said
Okay, but I'm going to need Fred Sanford not to do that.
Fred Sanford read the medical book,
I didn't
and he
never-
thought he caught it off some woman. You know, Fred, he read the book. Something going on with him, and he looked through the medical book,
again,
and he thought he got it from some woman. So.
Again, a fictional character.
It's
So
like saying
But
you're
I think you
PMSing right now.
You can also, like, in therapy, we use the term being immediate. Like, you know, so like, what's going on? You know, like, if there's something going on between me and you, like, I need to be immediate with what's happening. And sometimes being immediate is simply saying, I don't know exactly what's going on. I don't.
At that time.
I want to be here for you. And I know I'm not an expert on what you're going through, but I want to support you. These are some things I think I can do, but can you tell me how I can better support you? That's acknowledging I don't know, but something is here. Can you tell me? And if you can't, that's okay. I just wanted you to know that I see that something is different. You know, we can sort of acknowledge it without having anything figured out.
I
And
think
being
that
okay
would
with
be
that.
the sexiest thing a man could do. Honestly, to talk to us like that and say, not try to fix it, because that's the natural go-to. I gotta fix it. But to say, I don't know how to be here for you, but I realize. So what can we do together? Let's be partners in this.
And sometimes it's, what do you need right now? Like, you know, sometimes like if a friend calls or something, you know, I've learned to ask them like, what do you need me to be right now? Because if I jump into feel like, do we need to go ride over their house? Do I need
the Vaseline?
Who do you need me to be? Like, do you need me to, like, you know, boost you up? Yeah, and they can tell, because, you know, your partner, your wife, your husband, they may not need you to solve it. They may not need you to answer it. They may not even know, but sometimes simply asking, who do you need me, to be? My husband is a fixer. He's a doer. You know, he's his sort of like love language, if you ascribe it, he's like, it's doing. Mine, not so much. And as I enter perimenopause, yeah, it's just like, I don't know, you know. But my point is, part of what you do is be transparent about what you're thinking and what you are trying to, about your intentions. A person cannot quite argue with your feelings, right? And that, like, you're sort of like your intentions to help them. Now, they may be able to take offense to your behavior, like you did this and I didn't ask you to, but oftentimes women, anyone, they want to connect. And if you say, I don't know how to help, but I want to help, can you tell me what you need right now?
Oh, it's 10 o'clock. I mean, no. And the reason why I say that, I know everybody else got lives, and I know you got to go back on the road, but this has to be done again and again and again and again and again, because the purpose of this show is to get the information out to my community.
Yes.
This is my pulpit, and this is how I address my parishioners.
Amen.
Right here. And I need y'all to promise me that we can continue these conversations. And Doc, you have an event coming up.
I do. That's right. The one on Sunday, Classic City Entertainment. Yeah, they're hosting a mental health. It's a Stepper Sunday, and so it's called Stepping on My Mind. But is to educate about mental health.
Oh, very good.
At the DFW this way, right across the street. Bishop Park's where Sunset.
Very good.
And we're hoping that everyone will come out, and not just this, but any event, any opportunity to go and be in the space where people are talking about mental health, not just at a surface level, but even if it's at a surface level, something is better than nothing.
We have to continue these conversations. Like I say, next week, the men are going to be in the room. And
I'll beat you next week.
But I think that is important, because we need y'all and know and hear some of these conversations so we can know how to deal with some of this stuff. Because we, as alike as we are different. We're just totally different. And we would never completely understand each other, but if we can want to understand, to me, that makes us come together and be each other's village, to be each other's helpmate. So I thank y'all. I thank each and every one of you ladies for coming in here and having this conversation in the barbershop tonight. I want to thank my pastor, Shay.
He always forgets names.
Oh, no, that's that pastor Shay.
I know, but it takes a second.
Well, he was trying to decide if he was going to call me.
But I want to thank you for running point tonight, because I know I could have came in here and did, but to me it's important when we do these things to have women handle women business. You know, I definitely want to thank you, because like I say, my therapist, Malcolm Perry, has been trying to get us together for a while.
Yes.
So I thank you for showing up and doing what you do. I want to thank you, Kat.
Oh,
I finally count your name. Yes.
He always forgets when he looks at me. He's like,
I want to thank you for not only bringing the cupcakes, but giving us a different perspective. That was I was intentional about that.
well, like you said, with community and men and women coming together, it's also community this way too, because as women, we might understand certain things that each other have gone through, similarities, but as women of color, I can't speak to your experience and nobody can speak to mine, but being able to sit down and have open conversations and learn from each other, that's imperative.
Absolutely. And to me, it's important for your daughters, these beautiful little young ladies, to see that we can do this. Ms. B, you know what you mean to me.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for the transparency.
Yes.
Always.
You know, she's magic.
Hello.
Thank you.
Very welcome. Did you?
I got to do mine, and then I'm gonna turn it over to you. She's our poet for the year, and so normally, Larry, my boy Larry, the legend, usually take us out with a little something. But tonight, we are blessed to have She's Magic, who's an exceptional poet in her own right. But I'm gonna do mine, and then I'm gonna let you do yours. We're gonna get on up out of here. This game called life is a series of moments. The past is just that, the past. Learn from it and be thankful for it. The future, prepare for it. It's coming. Let's get to the next one. The present, it is a gift. Enjoy the journey. Take pictures, but most importantly, thank God.
So the poem is called How's Your Mental? What if I told you life is meant to be experimental? I never said it would be gentle. Listening to Nothing in This World by Kiki Watt, beautiful instrumental. In this time you have a soul, transcendental, using energy to transform gains and skills that are elemental. God is who we see as our parental. Healing the world for me is monumental. Being an avatar on earth is just a rental. Thank you.
Hey y'all, it's time to sweep the floors, clean the clippers, slim fit and scalper. I know y'all around here somewhere. I know. I'm leaving the bathroom for y'all. The shop is closed. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
We're talking randomly. Talking random. We're talking randomly. Talking random.